In a small town, tucked between quiet streets and old houses, lived a girl who seemed to belong more to the shadows than the sunlight. She had always been quiet, gentle in every way, from the way she walked to the way she spoke. People often said she was shy, but those who looked closer could see a quiet determination behind her soft eyes. She carried herself with care, always careful not to disturb anyone or anything around her. The girl's hands were delicate, small, and soft, but they carried a strength that most people would never guess. Her love for music began before she could even remember. While other children were running in the streets or playing games, she would sit for hours listening to the faint sounds that drifted from the windows of neighbors who owned pianos. Sometimes she would hum along, creating little tunes in her head that made her feel like she had a secret world of her own. Her family could not afford a piano. They had little money and even less time to think about luxuries like music lessons. Yet the girl did not let that stop her. She found ways to connect with her music, tapping on the kitchen counter, sliding her fingers over worn-out keyboards at the local store, and practicing silently whenever she could. The world around her was busy and loud, but in her room, she could create a space where nothing else mattered. Her hands, though fragile, moved carefully and thoughtfully over imaginary keys. She imagined herself playing for an audience, imagining how the notes would rise and fall, painting pictures in the air. It was her escape, her joy, and the one thing that gave her a sense of purpose. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could feel the music flowing through her, as if it were part of her very being. The melodies she created in her mind were full of hope, full of stories she wanted to tell but could not speak aloud. Her neighbors sometimes noticed faint melodies drifting through the air, soft and tentative, almost shy. A few would pause on the street and smile, wondering who could make such beautiful sounds. But most people passed by without thinking much about it. In her quiet world, that did not matter. She did not need recognition. She played for herself, for the feeling that the music gave her heart. Her gentle hands, though so careful, could reach depths of emotion that many adults around her could not even begin to understand. At school, she was often overlooked. Teachers would give attention to louder, more outgoing students. Classmates were more interested in games, gossip, and the latest trends. The girl floated through her days unnoticed, carrying a notebook filled with musical notes she had taught herself to write. Some days, she would sit under the big oak tree in the schoolyard and sketch melodies on the pages, imagining how they would sound if she could only play them out loud. The tree became her confidant, a silent listener that never judged her, never laughed at her dreams. Her family noticed her talent, of course, and they encouraged it in the quiet ways they could. Her mother would hum along when she thought no one was listening, smiling at the little tunes her daughter shared. Her father, who worked long hours, sometimes brought home small gifts, a used music book or a set of inexpensive sheet music, just to show he understood. They did not have much, but they gave her what mattered most: love, encouragement, and a safe place to grow her music. One day, as she walked home from school, she noticed a flyer pinned to a post. It announced a small talent show at the community center. The girl stopped and stared at it for a long time. The idea of performing in front of people made her stomach twist with nervousness. She had always played in secret, and the thought of anyone watching made her palms sweat. But at the same time, her heart fluttered with excitement. Could she really share her music with others? Could her gentle hands make the bold sound she imagined in her dreams? That evening, she sat at the little keyboard in her room and tried to practice. Her hands trembled as she pressed the keys, unsure if the notes would come out right. She made mistakes and frowned, but each time she hit a wrong note, she tried again. Slowly, she began to feel the music flowing through her fingers. It was not perfect, but it was hers. The melodies rose and fell with her breathing, carrying pieces of her soul. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm guide her. For a moment, she forgot about the world outside, about the doubts and whispers, and she simply played. As days passed, she practiced more and more. Sometimes she would play until her fingers ached, yet she did not stop. Every note was a small victory, every melody a story she had been holding inside. She began to feel a strange kind of courage growing within her. It was not loud or forceful. It was quiet, like a tiny spark that could ignite something bigger if given a chance. The more she played, the more she realized that her gentle hands were not weak at all. They were strong enough to bring music to life. Her friends noticed the change in her too. Though she still spoke softly and avoided the center of attention, there was a new confidence in the way she moved. Sometimes when she hummed a tune in class or tapped it out on her desk, a few classmates would pause, curious about the delicate music she seemed to carry everywhere. Most of them did not understand the depth of her talent, but that did not matter to her. She had begun to understand that her music was not about being seen. It was about feeling, about sharing a part of herself that words could never capture. One quiet evening, the girl looked out her window at the town below. The streetlights flickered softly, and the world seemed to hum with possibilities she had never noticed before. She picked up her old worn keyboard and began to play. This time, she did not just tap the keys, she let her emotions guide her. Her gentle hands moved with intention, each note carrying a story of hope, fear, joy, and longing. She felt alive in a way she had never felt before. It was in that moment she understood something important. Music could be brave, even when the person playing it was quiet and small. And so in her little room, surrounded by the warmth of her family and the soft shadows of her home, the girl practiced. Every day, every hour, she let her hands tell stories no one else could. She dreamed of the talent show she had seen on the flyer, imagining herself on that stage sharing her music with a real audience. Fear still lingered as it always would, but it no longer controlled her. She knew that one day her gentle hands would make a bold sound that could not be ignored, and that thought carried her forward note by note, melody by melody. Her journey had begun quietly, almost unnoticed by the world, but it was real and full of promise. In those early days, she learned that courage did not always roar, that sometimes it was soft and steady, and that the world would listen if only she gave it the chance. And so she continued, practicing in secret, dreaming of the day when her music would rise from her quiet room and fill the hearts of everyone who heard it. The day of the school recital arrived quietly, almost like a soft wind passing through the hallways. The girl had been practicing for weeks, yet her nerves were still tied tightly around her stomach. Every time she thought about performing in front of her classmates, her heart raced, and her hands felt smaller than they really were. She wanted to run away, to hide in the corner of the school library and pretend the recital didn't exist. But there was a voice inside her, quiet but persistent, reminding her of the melodies she had kept alive in her room for so long. Those melodies deserved to be heard. When she entered the auditorium, she noticed how large it felt compared to her small frame. The seats were filled with students, teachers, and parents, chatting quietly or checking their phones. The girl took a deep breath and tried to steady herself, gripping the edge of the piano bench until her fingers tingled. Her teacher, who had encouraged her to play, gave her a small, reassuring smile from across the stage. That simple gesture calmed her a little, and she felt as if she wasn't completely alone. As the recital began, students came up one by one. Some played lively pieces with loud notes that filled the room. Some struggled, making small mistakes, and others played well enough to earn quiet applause. The girl watched, listening to the music around her, letting it settle in her chest. She realized that she wasn't just nervous about making mistakes. She was nervous about showing the world the music that came from her heart, the music she had nurtured in silence for so long. Finally, it was her turn. The teacher called her name, and a hush fell over the room. The girl's legs felt weak and her palms were sweaty. She walked slowly to the piano, each step feeling heavier than the last. Sitting on the bench, she positioned her hands over the keys, feeling the smooth surface under her fingertips. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember the melodies she had imagined so many times in her room. The first note trembled. It was soft and uncertain, almost as if it were asking for permission to exist. A few students snickered, noticing her hesitation. The girl's chest tightened, and she felt a wave of doubt wash over her. Maybe she wasn't meant to do this. Maybe her hands were too gentle, too small, to make a real sound in front of so many people. But then, she remembered the countless evenings she had spent practicing, the way her fingers had danced over invisible keys when no one was watching, the way her music had filled the silent corners of her home. She took a deep breath, letting her memories guide her, and pressed down on the keys again. This time the notes flowed more smoothly. Her gentle hands moved with purpose, each finger finding its place naturally. The music started to fill the room, soft at first, then growing in confidence. The girl felt herself slipping into the melody, forgetting about the audience, the stage, and even the nervousness that had gripped her moments before. All that existed was the music and her connection to it. She let her hands tell the story she had kept hidden for so long, a story of quiet hope, of patience, and of courage that had been quietly building inside her. The audience noticed the change almost immediately. The soft laughter and whispers faded as everyone became captivated by the sound. There was something unusual in the music, something pure and heartfelt that reached beyond the notes. It was not a flashy performance meant to impress, but a deeply human expression that touched those who listened. The girl's gentle hands were making a bold sound, one that demanded attention without shouting, one that filled the space with emotion and sincerity. As the melody continued, she began to feel more confident. Her hands moved faster, but never recklessly. Each note was deliberate, carrying her emotions and intentions. She remembered how she had practiced in her room, imagining herself playing for an audience, and now that vision was coming true. She realized that her gentle nature was not a weakness, it was part of her strength. It allowed her to feel deeply, to express delicately, and to create a sound that resonated in ways louder, harsher music could not. Some students shifted in their seats, surprised by the depth of her performance. Even the teachers who had seen many recitals seemed captivated. A few parents leaned forward, their eyes wide as they took in the music that flowed from the small, quiet girl. Those who had doubted her, those who had whispered that she might be too shy or too timid, were now silent, watching in awe as she poured herself into the piano. Every note carried a part of her soul, and the audience could feel it without knowing exactly why. Halfway through the piece, the girl's hands began to move with a kind of freedom she had never experienced before. She lost track of time, lost track of fear. The music became an extension of herself, a conversation between her heart and the world. She remembered the times she had been ignored, the times she had been overlooked, and she realized that those moments had shaped her, not limited her. They had given her patience, understanding, and a desire to express herself in the most genuine way possible. Her gentle hands were not weak, they were powerful, and they were finally being heard. The final notes of the piece lingered in the air, soft, but full of meaning. The girl's heart was racing, not with fear, but with a sense of accomplishment she had never felt before. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting perhaps polite applause, but what she saw made her catch her breath. The entire auditorium was quiet for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, savoring the last echoes of her music. Then slowly the applause began. Soft at first, then growing louder and louder, filling the room with a sound almost as powerful as her music. Some students looked embarrassed for having doubted her. Others smiled, amazed by what they had just witnessed. Teachers and parents clapped enthusiastically, some even standing to show their appreciation. The girl sat at the piano, trembling slightly, feeling a mixture of relief and joy. She had done it. She had shared the music she had held in her heart for so long, and people had listened. She had taken a step out of her quiet world and into a place where her gentle hands could make a bold sound, and it had worked. After the recital, a few students approached her. "I didn't know you could play like that," one said quietly, looking a little ashamed for having laughed before. Another smiled, saying, "Your music, it's really beautiful." The girl nodded, too shy to speak much, but inside she felt a warmth that made her chest swell. For the first time, she realized that sharing her music was not about seeking attention or praise. It was about giving a part of herself to the world and trusting that it would matter. Her teacher pulled her aside later, smiling proudly. "You have something very special," the teacher said. "Your hands are gentle, but the sound you make is brave. Never forget that." The girl nodded, holding on to the words. They made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. She realized that courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and persistent. Sometimes it was the willingness to take a small step forward despite fear. That night, as she walked home, the girl thought about what had happened. The memory of the music, of the audience listening, and of her own hands moving confidently over the keys filled her with a sense of possibility. She understood now that her journey was only beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more moments when doubt would creep in. But she also knew that she had discovered something vital. Her gentle hands could make a bold sound, and that sound could touch people in ways words never could. Back in her room, she sat at her keyboard once more. She played a few soft notes, savoring the feeling of connection that music gave her. She knew that this was just the start of something bigger. One day, she thought, she would play for larger audiences, perhaps even beyond her small town. But for now, she allowed herself to enjoy the quiet triumph of the day. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, shared her heart through her music, and realized that her gentle nature was a strength, not a limitation, and so the girl continued to practice, to imagine and to create. Each melody she played became a little more confident, a little bolder. The timid girl who had once been afraid of being seen had begun to discover her voice not through words but through the music that flowed from her hands. She knew that every note was a step forward, every melody a bridge between her inner world and the people around her. She had tasted the feeling of being heard, and it was a sensation she wanted to chase again and again. In those quiet hours, alone with her music, the girl felt a deep sense of purpose. She understood that the world would not always notice her immediately. Some might still overlook her, and some might still doubt her abilities. But she had learned an important truth. It did not matter if the world recognized her right away. What mattered was the courage to share her gift, the determination to keep playing, and the patience to let her gentle hands make the bold sound that she had always dreamed of creating. After the school recital, the girl felt a mix of excitement and nervousness that she had never experienced before. For the first time, people had truly listened to her music. They had heard what she had carried quietly in her heart for so long. But with that recognition came new questions and new challenges. Could she do it again? Could she play in front of more people in a bigger space with higher expectations? The thought both thrilled and frightened her. A few days later, a notice appeared on the bulletin board at school announcing a local music competition. It was open to all young musicians in the town, and the winner would receive a small scholarship and the chance to perform at a community event. Her teacher saw her staring at the poster and gently nudged her. "You should enter," the teacher said. "You have talent, and the world deserves to hear it." The girl nodded, but inside, fear wrapped around her heart like a heavy blanket. She had performed in front of her classmates, yes, but this was different. This was strangers, judges, and a bigger stage. That evening, she sat by her old keyboard at home, running her fingers over the keys almost absent-mindedly. The music from the recital still lingered in her mind, each note a reminder of what she was capable of. But the thought of competing made her anxious. What if she made mistakes? What if her gentle hands could not create the bold sound she wanted to share? For hours she hesitated, torn between fear and desire. She wanted to challenge herself, to take a step forward, but the shadows of doubt kept creeping in. Her parents noticed her struggle. Her mother placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to act even when you are afraid." Her father, who usually spoke little, added quietly, "You have a gift. Don't let doubt stop you from sharing it." Their words did not erase her fear, but they planted a seed. The girl realized that she had already faced fear before in the recital and had found a way through. Perhaps she could do it again. Over the next few days, she practiced more than ever. She treated the competition like a journey rather than a performance. Every day she focused on small improvements, her timing, her control, her expression. She discovered that her gentle hands could create contrasts in music that were more powerful than she had imagined. Soft passages could feel tender and vulnerable, while louder sections could feel bold and commanding, even without shouting or forcing the notes. The more she practiced, the more she believed in the sound she could make. The day of the competition arrived with a mixture of gray clouds and sunlight, as if nature itself reflected the girl's emotions. The hall was larger than her school auditorium, with rows of chairs stretching out and a polished grand piano waiting on the stage. She had never seen such a large instrument before. Its shiny surface reflected the overhead lights, and the weight of its presence made her heart beat faster. She reminded herself that this piano was just another friend, another tool to help her tell her story, and slowly, the nervousness began to ease. Backstage, the girl watched the other participants prepare. Some were confident, chatting and laughing with their friends. Others were quiet like her, heads bowed, hands folded. She noticed the skill of some performers and felt a twinge of doubt. Could she measure up to them? Could her gentle hands, so often overlooked, make a mark in this setting? But then she remembered her teacher's words, her parents' encouragement, and the music that lived in her heart. She realized that this was not about comparing herself to others. It was about expressing herself, sharing what only she could offer. When her name was called, the girl walked toward the stage with slow, careful steps. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she held her head high. She positioned herself at the grand piano, feeling the smooth, cold keys under her fingertips. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and let herself imagine the music she had practiced for so many hours. This was the moment she had been preparing for, not just to play, but to tell a story through sound, to let her gentle hands create something bold and unforgettable. The first note came out soft, almost hesitant, but then it began to grow. The girl let her fingers move naturally, each note finding its place in the melody. She felt her body relax as the music took over, guiding her hands and her heart. The audience leaned in, sensing something special. It was not a performance meant to impress, but a story unfolding in real time. Every chord, every pause, every gentle trill carried emotion. Her hands, which had seemed so fragile, now commanded attention without needing to shout. Halfway through the piece, she noticed something remarkable. The audience, which had been polite and attentive at first, was now completely absorbed. Parents, teachers, and other students were leaning forward in their seats, as if drawn into a world the girl had created with her music. A judge sitting at the front furrowed her brow, clearly trying to follow every note. And yet she seemed moved in a way that went beyond technical skill. The girl realized that her music could reach people, could touch hearts, could convey what words often could not. For the first time, she truly understood the power of her gentle hands. They had spent so long hidden, so long practicing in secret, but now they could speak boldly, creating a sound that demanded attention. She was no longer playing for herself alone. She was playing for the world, showing that courage could be quiet, strength could be soft, and talent could rise from patience and care. The thought made her feel a wave of confidence that she had never felt before. As she played, memories of her journey flashed through her mind. She remembered the nights she had practiced alone in her room, the times she had doubted herself, and the small victories that had led to this moment. Each memory strengthened her performance, giving it depth and sincerity. She realized that all the moments of being overlooked, underestimated, and ignored had shaped her music in ways no one else could replicate. Her gentle hands were now instruments not just of sound, but of experience, emotion, and courage. When the final notes rang out, they lingered in the air like a soft echo of her heart. The audience remained silent for a moment, as if savoring what they had just heard. Then slowly the applause began. It started quietly, a few claps here and there, and grew steadily into a wave of appreciation that filled the hall. The girl's chest swelled with emotion. She had done it. She had shared her music, and it had moved people. Her gentle hands had created a bold sound, one that could not be ignored. And she felt a sense of accomplishment that was both exhilarating and humbling. After the performance, people came up to her, praising her talent and asking how long she had been playing. Some admitted that they had doubted her at first, but now they were amazed. Her teacher hugged her tightly, saying, "You see, your music carries your heart. Never stop playing like this." The girl nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. She realized that recognition was not the goal. The goal was to share her music, and in doing so, she had connected with others in a way she had never imagined possible. That evening, back at home, the girl reflected on the day. The competition had been intimidating. The stage had seemed enormous, and the audience had been filled with strangers. Yet she had faced her fears, trusted her hands, and let the music guide her. She understood that life would always present challenges that felt bigger than she could handle. But courage was not about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear, about allowing one's inner strength to shine even when the world seemed daunting. Her parents praised her quietly, proud of the effort and determination she had shown. Her mother said, "You played with your heart, not just your hands. That is something no one can take away from you." Her father added, "Remember, it is not the applause that matters. It is the courage you found within yourself." The girl smiled, understanding more fully than ever before that her music was a reflection of herself. Gentle, patient, and quietly powerful. In the days following the competition, the girl continued to practice and compose. She found that each new piece was easier to create because she had discovered a new layer of confidence. Her gentle hands no longer felt fragile or timid. They had become instruments of expression, capable of creating both softness and boldness. She dreamed of performing again, imagining stages larger than the competition hall, audiences bigger than she had ever seen, and the possibility of touching even more hearts with her music. The local music competition had changed her in subtle but profound ways. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace her gentle nature, and to recognize that courage and talent could coexist quietly, yet powerfully. Her hands, which had once seemed delicate and unremarkable, were now her greatest strength. They had allowed her to tell her story, to share her emotions, and to make the world listen in ways she had never expected. And so, with each day that passed, the girl continued her journey. She practiced, she dreamed, and she prepared for the next opportunity to perform. She knew that challenges would continue, that doubts would return, and that the world would not always understand her immediately. But she also knew that her music was hers, that her gentle hands could create bold sounds, and that she had the courage to face whatever came next. The journey was just beginning, but the girl had taken the first steps with determination, patience, and a heart full of music. She had discovered that the world could be changed not only by loud voices, but by the quiet, steady, and heartfelt ones. And as she sat at her keyboard that night, letting her fingers wander over the keys, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She had begun to understand the true power of her gentle hands, the power to make a bold sound that could be heard, felt, and remembered. After the competition, the girl felt a new sense of confidence, but she quickly realized that not everyone was ready to accept her talent. Some people in the town whispered among themselves, saying things like, "She is too quiet to be a real musician," or, "She is only lucky. She will never make it far." These words could have crushed her as they had in the past when she had been overlooked or dismissed. But now something inside her had changed. She had felt the power of her own hands, the strength of the music she could create, and she refused to let others' doubts stop her. At school, things were different. Some classmates still smirked when they saw her approach, as if expecting her to fail. A few who had praised her during the recital now seemed unsure of her abilities. It was confusing and hurtful. She had hoped that her performance would earn her acceptance, but the world was not always fair. She began to understand that talent alone did not always guarantee respect or recognition. What mattered was persistence and the willingness to keep sharing her gift. Even when others doubted her, her teacher noticed the change in the girl's expression, the way she hesitated before speaking or practicing. The teacher came to her quietly one afternoon and said, "Not everyone will understand what you are doing, but that does not mean it is not valuable. Keep playing for yourself and for those who can hear your heart. That is what will matter in the end." The girl nodded, feeling a little lighter. It was a reminder that recognition was not always immediate, and that sometimes the journey required patience. Despite the whispers and skepticism, the girl continued to practice diligently. She spent long hours at her keyboard, experimenting with new melodies and techniques. She discovered that her music could convey more than just notes. It could tell stories, capture emotions, and create connections with people she had never even met. Each day her confidence grew, and with it the boldness of her playing. She began to believe that her gentle hands could make a difference, that the music she carried inside could touch hearts and change minds. One afternoon, the community center announced a public showcase for young musicians, open to anyone who wanted to perform. The prize was modest, just a certificate and a small recognition. But for the girl, it was an opportunity to test herself in front of an unfamiliar audience. She felt the old nerves returning, but this time they were different. They were not a sign of fear. They were a signal that she cared deeply about her music and the impression it could make. She decided to enter, knowing that she had something unique to offer. When the day of the showcase arrived, the hall was filled with families, friends, and curious townspeople. The girl could hear conversations, laughter, and the shuffle of feet. Some people were clearly skeptical, murmuring to each other, wondering if this quiet girl could really impress anyone. She felt their eyes on her as she walked to the stage, their doubts pressing down like invisible weights. But she held her head high and focused on the keyboard in front of her. Her hands rested lightly on the keys, trembling only slightly, and she took a deep breath, ready to let the music speak. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the nervousness melted away. The melody began softly, gentle and cautious at first, but it gradually grew in strength and confidence. The girl lost herself in the music, allowing her emotions to guide her hands. She poured every bit of her experience into the piece, the hours of practice, the moments of doubt, the nights spent imagining herself performing, and the courage she had found in her heart. The notes floated through the hall, filling every corner with a sound that was both tender and powerful. The audience reacted slowly at first. Some people whispered to each other, unsure how to respond. Some shifted in their seats, caught off guard by the intensity of the performance. But as the girl continued, something remarkable happened. The music drew them in. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and people leaned forward, captivated by the boldness and beauty of her sound. Those who had doubted her before were now listening intently, realizing that there was more to this quiet girl than they had ever imagined. Halfway through her performance, the girl noticed the expressions around her. A few parents had tears in their eyes. Some of the older students were watching with awe, no longer smirking or whispering. Even the people who had been skeptical before seemed changed, as if her music had reached something deep inside them. She felt a surge of courage and determination. Her gentle hands were no longer just delicate instruments. They were powerful tools that could create emotion, inspire respect, and command attention. As the final notes resonated through the hall, the girl held her hands over the keys for a moment, savoring the silence. Then slowly applause began. At first it was small, polite claps, but it quickly grew louder and louder. People rose to their feet, cheering, smiling, and some even wiping tears from their eyes. The girl's heart raced with a mix of relief and pride. She had done it. She had faced skepticism, fear, and doubt, and she had come out stronger. Her gentle hands had created a bold sound that could not be ignored, and the world had noticed. After the performance, many people approached her. Some apologized for their earlier doubt, saying they had underestimated her. Others simply smiled, saying how moved they were by her music. The girl listened quietly, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized that recognition was not about proving people wrong. It was about sharing her gift with sincerity and letting her music speak for itself. Her gentle hands had found their voice, and it was a voice worth hearing. Her teacher was the first to hug her tightly after the applause died down. "I told you," the teacher said softly. "Your music has power because it comes from your heart. You are brave, not because you are loud or forceful, but because you are willing to be seen, to be heard, and to trust yourself." The girl smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she had never experienced before. She understood more than ever that courage was not measured by how loud one could shout, but by how boldly one could act despite fear. That evening, back at home, the girl reflected on the day. She thought about the people who had doubted her, the moments when she had hesitated, and the courage it had taken to step onto that stage. She realized that the journey of music was not just about performing, it was about persistence, patience, and belief in herself. She understood that every challenge, every skeptical glance, and every whispered doubt had prepared her for moments like this. Her gentle hands had carried her through, creating a sound that was both soft and unforgettable. In the weeks that followed, the girl noticed a change in the way people treated her. The students who had once ignored or mocked her now showed respect. Teachers began to encourage her to perform in school events more often. Some community members even approached her family, expressing admiration for her talent and determination. She still remained humble, quietly practicing and composing in her room. But she had begun to realize that her music could make a real difference. Her gentle hands could reach people in ways words could not. The girl also discovered something unexpected. Her music inspired others. Younger students who had felt overlooked or shy began to approach her, asking her to teach them simple melodies. She smiled and shared what she could, realizing that her journey was not just about herself. Her courage, patience, and talent could encourage others to find their own voice, to trust in themselves, and to embrace their own gentle strengths. She had become a quiet role model, showing that boldness could take many forms. One evening, while practicing alone, the girl reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the shy child who had played on an old keyboard in her room, dreaming of being heard. She remembered the first recital, the nervous steps onto the stage, and the trembling hands that had pressed the keys for the very first time. And now, she sat at a grand piano, her music filling a hall, touching hearts and commanding respect. She smiled, understanding that the journey was ongoing, but that each step forward, no matter how small, was part of a larger story. The girl realized that true courage was not about never feeling fear. It was about feeling it, accepting it, and moving forward anyway. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and her own insecurities, yet she had continued to play, continued to believe in herself, and continued to let her music speak. Her gentle hands, once overlooked and underestimated, had become instruments of boldness, capable of creating emotion, inspiring respect, and leaving a lasting impression. And so, She continued to practice, to perform, and to dream. She knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, and that there would be challenges, critics, and moments of uncertainty. But she also knew that her music had power, and that her gentle hands could create a sound that was uniquely hers, a sound that was bold, heartfelt, and impossible to ignore. Each day she played with intention, letting her experiences guide her fingers, and letting her courage guide her heart. The girl's journey was far from over, but she had learned a vital truth. Respect and recognition were not given. They were earned through persistence, sincerity, and the willingness to share one's gift despite fear. Her gentle hands had carried her to this moment, and they would continue to carry her forward, creating melodies that were soft, powerful, and unforgettable. She had found her voice, and she knew that one day the world would continue to listen. Time passed, and the girl continued to grow in her music and confidence. The experiences she had gained through the recitals, competitions, and public performances had shaped her in ways she could not have imagined. Her gentle hands had become instruments of both strength and beauty, and she had learned that courage was not always loud. True courage, she discovered, could be quiet, steady, and powerful all at once. Each note she played carried her heart, her patience, and her determination, reaching those who were willing to listen, and even those who had once doubted her. The girl began to receive invitations to perform at more significant events. At first she was nervous. The stages were bigger, the audiences larger, and the expectations higher. But she no longer felt the same fear that had once paralyzed her at her first recital. She knew that her music came from her heart, and that sincerity could speak louder than technique alone. Her hands, once small and timid, had learned to create boldness in sound, to convey emotion that words could never capture. She understood that every performance was a story, a message, and an opportunity to touch the lives of others. One day she was invited to play at a large town event. The hall was crowded, filled with people she had never met. Some were there to enjoy music. Others were curious to see if the quiet girl who had made waves in small recitals could really impress on such a big stage. The girl felt the old nervous flutter in her stomach, but it was different this time. She welcomed it. It reminded her that she cared deeply about what she was doing, that her music mattered, and that she had a responsibility to share it fully. She walked onto the stage, her posture calm, her eyes bright with focus. The grand piano before her gleamed under the lights, its polished surface reflecting the faces of the audience. She could hear whispers, murmurs, and the shuffle of feet as people adjusted in their seats. A small part of her wanted to retreat, to step back into the safety of the shadows. But then she thought of the journey that had brought her here, the lonely nights of practice, the timid fingers finding their way across keys, the first recital, the competition, and the quiet encouragement of her family and teacher. She drew a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and let the music begin. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, as if testing the space, the audience, and herself. But soon the girl found her rhythm. Each chord, each melody moved with precision and emotion, a reflection of the countless hours she had spent preparing, practicing, and dreaming. The audience fell silent, drawn into the music, feeling the depth of expression that emanated from the girl's gentle hands. She played with a combination of delicacy and boldness that surprised even herself. Her hands moved naturally, carrying a confidence that had been built not overnight but over years of quiet determination. As the music unfolded, the girl noticed reactions from the audience. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. A few wiped tears away, touched by the beauty and honesty of her playing. She realized that her music was doing exactly what she had hoped it would. It was connecting, inspiring, and leaving an impression that went beyond the notes on the page. For the first time, she truly understood the power she held in her hands. Her gentle touch could create something unforgettable. Halfway through her performance, she allowed herself to lose track of time. She no longer thought about the audience, the stage, or the judgment of others. All that mattered was the music, the story it carried, and the courage she had cultivated over the years. Every note became an expression of her journey. The moments of doubt, the quiet practice sessions in her room, the first applause that had felt so overwhelming, and the lessons she had learned about perseverance and belief in herself. Her hands, once so timid, now commanded attention with subtle power, proving that strength could come in the softest of forms. When the final chord rang through the hall, there was a pause. a silence so complete it seemed to hold the weight of the music itself. Then gradually applause began to rise. It was soft at first, hesitant as if people were checking to see if they had heard correctly. Then it grew, louder and louder until the hall was filled with the sound of appreciation, admiration, and respect. The girl's heart raced, a mixture of relief, joy, and pride washing over her. She had done it. She had shared her music fully, and the world had listened. Her gentle hands had created a bold sound, and it had left an undeniable mark. After the performance, people came to her with smiles and words of praise. Some admitted that they had doubted her, only to realize that her talent and courage were undeniable. Others, younger students, asked if she could teach them, inspired by her journey. She spoke softly, sharing encouragement, and realized that her music had a ripple effect. It was not just about performance, but about inspiring others to find courage, to pursue their own passions, and to believe in themselves. Her influence had begun to grow, quietly, naturally, without her seeking it. Her family was waiting backstage, their faces filled with pride. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "You were magnificent. Your music speaks from your heart, and it has reached everyone here." Her father smiled, his eyes reflecting the same awe and admiration, saying, "We always knew you had this gift. Now everyone else can see it too." The girl felt warmth spread through her chest. She realized that recognition and success were not about proving people wrong. They were about sharing one's truth, embracing one's journey, and trusting that sincerity would resonate. In the days that followed, the girl's story began to circulate through the town. Local newspapers wrote brief pieces about her performance, neighbors spoke of it in hushed admiration, and teachers and community leaders began to encourage her to pursue music more seriously. Yet she remained humble. She continued to practice, to compose, and to explore new ways to express herself through sound. The applause and attention were gratifying, but they were not the reason she played. She played because music was a part of her, because it allowed her to tell stories that could not be spoken, and because it gave her a voice that had once been silent. The girl also noticed changes within herself. She no longer feared being seen or judged. Her confidence had grown, not because she wanted to be praised, but because she had discovered the value of her own determination and resilience. She understood that true courage was not about performing flawlessly or impressing everyone. It was about showing up, embracing vulnerability, and trusting one's own abilities. Her gentle hands, which had once seemed fragile, were now her instruments of bold expression, capable of reaching hearts and minds alike. With each new opportunity, she continued to grow. She composed new pieces, experimented with melodies, and explored the emotional depth that her music could convey. She began to see her talent not just as a personal gift, but as a responsibility, a way to inspire others, to encourage those who felt overlooked, and to show that quiet determination and patience could lead to extraordinary results. Her music became a bridge, connecting her inner world with the hearts of those around her. One evening, as she played alone in her room, the girl reflected on the path that had brought her here. She remembered the timid child who had tapped on an old keyboard, afraid to be noticed, afraid to be judged. She remembered the first recital, the nervous trembling, and the small victories that had gradually built her confidence. She remembered the competition, the skeptical audience, and the moment she realized her gentle hands could create something bold and unforgettable. And now, she understood that her journey was not just about music. It was about life itself. She realized that her story could inspire others, especially those who felt small, overlooked, or underestimated. Courage was not always dramatic or loud. It could be quiet, patient, and steady. Strength could come from gentleness, and talent could flourish in the shadows before it shone in the spotlight. The girl understood that every challenge she had faced, every doubt she had overcome, and every moment she had chosen to keep playing despite fear had prepared her for this life, this journey, and this expression of herself. From that night onward, the girl embraced every opportunity with renewed purpose. She played not just for herself, but for the countless others who might feel unseen or unheard. She shared her music with sincerity, knowing that each note carried her heart, her courage, and her determination. Her gentle hands, once underestimated, had become instruments of boldness and inspiration. They proved that quiet strength could move mountains, that patience could lead to extraordinary results, and that courage could take the softest forms yet leave the deepest impact. And so, Her journey continued, filled with music, courage, and the quiet power of persistence. She had discovered that the world could be moved by sincerity and dedication, that gentle hands could create bold sounds, and that true recognition was earned through perseverance and belief in oneself. Her story was a reminder to all who heard it. Greatness does not always arrive with noise and spectacle. Sometimes it arrives softly, through quiet determination, patient effort, and the courage to let one's heart be heard. The girl had come a long way from the shy child who had played in secret, but she knew that this was only the beginning. Her music, her courage, and her gentle hands would continue to touch lives, inspire hearts, and leave an enduring mark on the world. Every note she played was a testament to the power of persistence, the beauty of patience, and the quiet strength that resided within her. She had made the world listen, and she would continue to do so, one bold, heartfelt melody at a time.